Hello, my fellow podcasting friends. Welcome to this Power Up Your Podcast with ChatGPT workshop. I am so stinking excited to be with you guys here today. And if we've never met before, my name is Brittany Blackwell. I'm an instructional coach. I'm a former special educator and a former special education coordinator, as well as a mom/bonus mom of 5 kids. And I am a fellow podcaster and the host of the Resilient Teacher podcast, where I really focus on helping teachers to overcome burnout and empower them to create balance so that they can live their best lives inside and outside of the classroom with my agency, Teaching Mind, Body, and Soul. So needless to say, given all that I just told you about myself, I am a whiz at making stuff work and doing it in a way that reduces overwhelm. And I do this through a multitude of different ways where I focus on research and evidence-based and sustainable strategies, mindset work, but also through a digital approach to simplifying and systemizing. And one of the things that I've become super obsessed with is artificial intelligence, specifically ChatGPT, which we're going to be focusing on today. So I had the opportunity to be a guest on Sarah's podcast and for us to talk about podcast burnout. And so if you've not listened to that episode, I highly recommend going back and listening to episode 115 of the Podcasting for Educators podcast, because I really feel like that episode is kind of like a precursor to this, and the reason that I'm so passionate about helping you to automate your podcast workflow, as well as utilizing ChatGPT as your personal podcast assistant. And while I typically focus on teachers who are in the classroom, as I've worked with and collaborated with other teacher business owners, I've noticed that they too struggle with burnout, and more in the aspect of either business burnout or podcast burnout. And this is not the only business that I have been successful in. I've actually owned 2 other businesses that were, again, super successful, but I experienced that business burnout. And what's different now than it was before was that now I'm actually providing my services, my courses, my products digitally, and obviously, podcasting. And previously I worked with physical products. And so I have found that there are a ton of ways to really sustain your business and to streamline your passion and avoid this burnout with digital tools. I say all of that to say that my knowledge of running a business and running a podcast through automations has significantly reduced my overwhelm. And I truly believe that you can do the same thing. So today I want to help you learn the power of ChatGPT to be your virtual assistant. And so you can begin to automate to streamline your podcast workflow so that you don't reach podcast burnout. So let's jump right in. In order to make this super actionable for you, I've created a Notion dashboard/workbook to help you out with this. And so let me show you how to get into it. First, you're going to go to teachingmindbodyandsoul.com/podcast power up. And now what I want to do is make sure that I share my screen so that you can see what we are doing. From there, it's going to take you to this page here, which is the link to the dashboard in the workbook. If you have never used Notion before, it is really simple to get started. And I have a link here in this document to help you create your account. You can use my affiliate link here, but it is a free account. So you can sign up or log in here. So it's going to duplicate this and it's going to move it into your workspace. All right, so now we've got it going on. All right, so now this is completely editable for you to be able to access. So the first things you'll notice are that it's got this title here. You'll scroll on down, gives you a little bit of information about another way that you can automate your podcast through Podcast Guest Workflow Toolkit. We'll completely automate the whole thing for you. A little bit about that here. On the left-hand side, it tells you about me, a little bit about how to create your Notion account. If you're brand new to getting started with it, there is a getting started guide here, ways to connect with me, but here is where it gets juicy. All right. So I have created this into some columns to make this really easy for you to access and to be able to do the things for it. If you've never used ChatGPT before, you're brand new to it, you want some more information about how to get started, the fundamentals, the basics of ChatGPT, this is in your tasks section over here. And it has a little check mark here, but it's also linked. So you can click it and it automatically has you here in the pre-work section. So understand the basics of ChatGPT. So on your Notion dashboard, you'll be able to click directly into anything that has a link here. Okay, so your pre-work is here and you'll be able to open the basics of ChatGPT. Again, this is just the fundamentals, so you can totally skip over this. You don't have to do this part if you were already familiar with and you've used ChatGPT for a while. I added this section in here because the rest of what we're talking about requires this fundamental knowledge, okay? And so any of the extra bonuses down here will be available. In order to go back into the dashboard, you'll click up here at the right, and it's still into your dashboard in your workspace. So you'll scroll on down and you can click check off your pre-work. Okay. You already understand the basics of ChatGPT. Awesome. All right. So the remainder of this is super important if you're wanting to get ChatGPT to write in your voice, to provide you more relevant information. Because here is what happens. If you write very simple prompts, or if you just start talking to ChatGPT, it knows nothing about you, knows nothing about your podcast, your clients, any of that information. And so the next part of this is to prep your AI to understand who you are, what you serve, and what's important to you and how you write. Okay. So the next part of this is to prep your AI. So we're going to see this section here and we're going to complete the brand voice guide prompts. So this is linked. We can click directly into it just like this. So this strategy is all about leveraging your unique voice in order to get ChatGPT to be the best assistant to you. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is to provide an overview of what we do, how we serve our clients, how you help them overcome their challenges, and why this is important. And so each section that is in blue is a section where you're going to write that information. I already have this already created for me, so I'm just going to click into that just like so. The second step is to outline your listeners' pain points. What do your listeners struggle with? And so I typically like to look at the primary pain points and then look at the secondary pain points. So for this, I already have this laid out as well, and I can use my little shortcut here and it will automatically put that inside. The third step is to outline your listeners' interests, but also the desired solutions. So in this section, I'm going to put interests and this is my automated way of doing this. And I already have my desired solutions, primary and secondary, as well as their interests, but I also stuck a little extra in here too, totally not required, but their backstory. What is my customer avatars or my listener avatars backstory? Okay. And then what you will want to do is to find transcripts or content that you feel like reflects your brand voice the best. Now, there are 3 separate sections in here and this takes a little bit of time. Okay. You're going to have to go back. You could find social media posts, you could find emails, or you could just use podcast transcripts to pull out your brand voice. Okay. And I put 3 sections here because you might want different ways of talking, or you would want to provide ChatGPT with additional information. For this, though, I'm just going to erase this and put in my example here. Okay, so here's my example. I pulled this from an email, I think, that I did. And then here is another section here. You want to make note of any angles, topics, or style elements that you like to incorporate. Do you like to use big words or educational jargon? Do you want to write in long or short sentences? Do you want to use, diminishing words like maybe, just, some, a few, might, those types of things? If you are not sure of your overall tone, I have put in this little bonus section right here that says your tone and your voice is the overall attitude. So you might want to use ChatGPT to find out what your tone is. Okay. And so from this point on, you can actually copy this here. So I'm going to hit Control C or Command C if you're on a Mac, which I am, but I'm so used to saying control. So, and then I'd go right over into ChatGPT. Okay. And then I would hit Control V And what I want to do is I'm going to change this to one piece of content. Okay. Just for this example here. And what I want to do is I want to put in my example. Okay. I just pulled that exact same example that I already had and hit this button here. Okay. And it answers these questions for me. Okay. The creator doesn't use many big words or industry jargon. The language is conversational and accessible. They typically write in a mix of long and short sentences, maintain conversational tone. So you might want to offer another example if you don't feel like this really meets your brand voice. Okay. And so the more examples you give, the better ChatGPT will be able to refine the answers to these questions. So just for this example, we're just giving one piece of content to it to get this information. Once you have really nailed down, hey, this is the tone that I'm really going for. And hey, if it's not, that just tells you, you may need to adjust how you communicate in your social media or in your podcast or whatever. You'll copy this here. Okay. Copy this here, go back over into the brand voice guide and put that response here. So I just copied and pasted. And I didn't mean to actually get rid of that. You could, it doesn't really matter. All right. So now that we've got that information, we're going to put it all together in ChatGPT. This is probably my favorite part of this workbook, and especially the brand voice guide, is that I have synced that information that you already input to make it super simple for you to get started. Okay. Now, what you will want to do is to remove these arrows. Okay. So you'll remove those arrows there in each of these sections. But note, all of these sections are synced to what you already wrote. You already wrote this stuff, okay? And I actually don't want to delete everything. I just want to delete the arrow. There we go. Okay. Gave me an example. There's the example that I put in earlier. And I'm going to remove that. And now this whole thing is the prompt. Okay. I want to train you to write in my voice. First, I'm going to tell you about my podcast and my audience. Put that in here. The primary information, desired solutions. I gave some transcripts. So if I had more than one, it may be too long. But for this, I'll just put the one. And then I'm going to copy by hitting Control or Command C and put it straight into a new chat on ChatGPT. Hit enter. Got it. Let's dive in and work on capturing your podcast voice. I'm ready for the transcripts. So for this one, I only gave you one transcript. Here's another transcript. Okay. Number 2. And it's going to try to write like me. Okay. It's going to keep going. It's writing, it's writing, it's writing. And then what I want to do is once I think it's written kind of like me and it gives you a response, it might ask you for additional information. It might not. And so you could say, if it wants more additional information, you could put in this. If it does not, you're going to say, create a comprehensive brand voice guide that I can use this time and time again. So I'm going to paste that directly into ChatGPT, and it's going to give me a brand voice guide with my tone, with my style, with my language, my content focus, podcast episode structure, social media presence, engaging copy, all that jazz. Okay. Now, what I want to do is I want to read through this. Does this sound like me? If it doesn't, you may want to give it another transcript or another example of your emails. You could say, I want to give you an example of an email I wrote, and then you would provide that email. Or you say, I want to give you an example of a podcast transcript that I have. you would paste that into here and then say, is that still consistent with the brand voice that you created? Okay. And then once you have something that really nails down how you feel like you talk and it's pretty comprehensive, you'll just copy that directly from ChatGPT, copy, and then you'll place this in this blue box here. So I would say paste, and there's the brand voice guide. Now, anytime that you want to update this, you can absolutely do that. This is just giving you kind of a kickstart to getting ChatGPT to write in your voice. Cool? All right. So now let's go back to our podcast Power Up dashboard. And we completed the brand voice guide prompts. We pulled examples of our content. We used the voice framework. Now what you can do is you can add that into your custom instructions in ChatGPT so that you can use that time and time again. So again, these are all linked here. And what you might want to do is it's already got, again, this information linked for you. So what would you like ChatGPT to know about you to provide better responses? How would you like ChatGPT to respond? Okay. And so that's already pulled out explicitly for you. Now, here's the part that's a little bit tricky. Sometimes ChatGPT's brand voice guide can be a little bit too long to incorporate them into the custom instructions section because it only allows 1,500 characters per section of the custom instructions. Okay. So when it asks you, what would you like ChatGPT to know about you? This is what I want them to know. Okay. Copy. I'm going to go into ChatGPT down here at the bottom where my name is. I'm actually just using kind of like a burner account to be able to show this to you. And you might put, I'm a podcaster who specializes in episode related to blah, blah, blah. Okay. Or I can just paste in my information. Right? So it's got that information. How would you like ChatGPT to respond? Well, poop. I don't know if this is going to work because it seems a little bit long. So I'll just try it out and see what happens. I'm going to say right here, go all the way up to tone, Command C, and put that in here. You might not use it exactly this way. You can always create your own. And see what happened was it said, this is way too long. Okay. If it is too long, you can use this prompt here. Okay. And we can click right into it just like this. You can say develop. This is a really long one, actually. Copy. Exit. And I would just say create. Okay. And then I would go back into my brand voice and Control C. It now asks me for my brand voice guide. Paste. And it creates those for me. Okay, now I can copy, go back into my custom instructions, and then paste. And if it did too much, I can erase some of it. And then hit save once I have all of that information in it. Now, every time that I use ChatGPT, it's going to write in my voice, hopefully. Sometimes you do have to kind of play around with it. But this kind of gives you the step-by-steps. Now I've added that. Now it's time to create your prompts. All right. And so what I want you to try doing once you've got your custom instructions included, you've gone through this brand voice guide. Now what you want to do is you want to try out using for different use cases. So inside of this document, I have created a podcast prompt bank. And so there's a ton of ideas for using it here. You could develop podcast episode ideas, outline podcast episodes, write podcast show notes. You could create podcast titles and descriptions. You could script podcast advertising. You could draft podcast guest invitations, what have you. But they're all in this nice, cute little table here. Okay. You go through it just like this, or what you could do is you could look at it as a gallery. So a gallery looks very much like this. Or if you're looking specifically for content creation, here are those. Ideation is here as well. You can move your cursor over. You could see SEO and different strategy. I also added some add-on prompts and some learn prompts too, if you're looking to incorporate those, or these are linked. Okay. So if I'm wanting to look at topic generation, then I would click into this, and then it's a template. So you're just going to copy, and I would create a new chat because I like new chats. And then I would say, all right, I am a podcaster who works with, who do you work with? You would change that, burned out teachers with work-life balance. I do a lot more than that, but to reignite their passion for teaching so that they can beat the burnout cycle. And I want to give them a podcast episode, or I could do an instruction or a training. So just remove those brackets there on related to being addicted to stress. I'm just picking that because it's something that I've talked about on the podcast before. Give me a list of 30 podcast ideas and or resources that I can share with them. Cool. And it gives me a whole bunch of different ideas. Some of them aren't so bad. I don't dislike them. Oh, that one's actually a really good one. Making PD stress-free. So it gives a bunch of ideas. So there's 30 different ones that you may want to incorporate. And that's how you would use that. Okay. And so if you want to go back into the podcast prompt bank, you can look at different ones. That's pretty much the logistics behind that prompt bank. Okay. So you try out a couple of different ones, see what works best for you. Check that off. Now it's time to brainstorm some prompts that you would want to use. What are you wanting to use ChatGPT to really streamline in your podcast? So in this section, you've got a prompt brainstorming guide here, just to kind of help you kind of strategize how you can use it most effectively. And so what are some goals and objectives that you have for your podcast episodes? Which do you want to improve your engagement? Do you want to provide insights? Do you want to generate creative content? It's really up to you, which ones you want to. What types of prompts might you want to create? What types of podcasting issues do you run into most frequently? Now, this one's a really good one to kind of help you come up with some different kinds of prompts that maybe aren't in the podcast prompt bank. Okay. What types of content do you want to provide, but you hadn't gone through yet because you're not really sure how to think through providing that content cohesively? So this is just a prompt brainstorming guide to really support you in that. Okay. Once you've completed that, you'll check that off. And then what you want to do is you want really good prompts. You could tell it all day long, that you want a podcast guest episode on blah, blah, blah. But this is where I added the prep prompt framework to create your own prompts. Okay. The first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to prompt it. So you might say, create an engaging podcast introduction, right? but that's not going to give you a really good response. Even if you have those custom instructions inside of it, it's not going to give you really beneficial stuff. So you want to give it a role. You're a seasoned podcast host known for captivating introductions that pique listeners' interest. Now we're talking here. And then you want to be explicit in your directions. Okay. You want to be clear and specific about what you want the tool to do or what information you're looking for in the output. So you might say, craft a 30-second podcast introduction, use attention grabbing language, include a brief teaser about the episode's topic, end with a call to action, encouraging listeners to stay tuned. Okay. And then you want to set the parameters of that response. You already have some of this included in your brand voice guide, but the tone, the language, the word length, the number of paragraphs you want to have, the length of the sentences, the sentiment, the format, those types of things. So an example of this would be craft a 30-minute podcast introduction with a minimum of 75 words. Maintain an enthusiastic and engaging tone using conversational and relatable language provided in a script format that conveys a positive and intriguing vibe. Okay. So you'll notice how those are very different as you add on those frameworks. And then talking to the robot, and I put this in here, talking to a robot is easy peasy. But when it comes down to engineering your prompts, you have to first have some ideas brainstormed in order to determine the best way to do that. So once you've kind of had that brainstorm, you're looking at this prep prompt framework, then you can actually go in and use that to create your own prompts and put them into the podcast prompt frame or bank. So you can go all the way down to the bottom here. And so say you wanted to do an introduction. Now there's a ton of ideas in here, right? But you might say podcast advertisement. Okay. You could select your thing that you want to do here. So maybe it's strategy. Okay. Maybe you consider that to be strategy. So once you have that information in there, you can then type, you are a podcast host known for, so you give it a role, engaging and introductions, create a less than 60-second engaging introduction. So you see, I've given it a prompt. The prompt is that I want to give it an engaging introduction, but I gave it some parameters, create a less than 60-second engaging introduction. And if you have trouble with this, you can always go back into that prompt prep framework to see maybe what types of things you might want to include. I like this part, use an engaging and attention grabbing. So I like that. So I can copy that, go back in, head over into my podcast prompt, go all the way down to the bottom. And then that would be my information. Here is the topic because it won't know my topic. So that's pretty much how you can use this. Again, like I mentioned, inside of that prompt bank, there are tons of different ones in here. Show notes, episode titles, outlines, and you can see it's super specific here. Meta description. So you could do a series of meta descriptions given that information here. Podcast description SEO for a specific episode is here as well. Different ones that you can just kind of play around with, but more specifically for your workflow, you're going to want things that are kind of triggering the things that you struggle with. Okay. So use the prep prompt framework. We're done with that. Add your own prompts. We did that. Now what you're going to want to do is add this to your podcast workflow. So depending on what you're using, do not use all of these prompts all at one time. focus on that area that you want to optimize the most. If it is not that you want to, work on your episodes, you feel confident, you're doing well with that. Maybe you're wanting to focus on SEO. Then identify that and start to incorporate it into your workflow. If you're going to focus on SEO initially, which is what I've heard that you should do, then you might want to focus on that SEO and that part before you get into maybe outlining your podcast episodes or recording your podcast episodes to ensure that you are hitting those specific keywords, and ChatGPT can help you out with that. So you'll identify those use cases for utilizing ChatGPT, incorporate the use of ChatGPT into that workflow. And then what I want you to do is consider integrating ChatGPT with automations. There are so many ways that you can do this. One of those you may have seen me use is using text expanders. So I use a shortcut and then incorporate it in there. But there are other ways that you can automate the use of ChatGPT. Once you have these prompts, once you have this brand voice guide, you can then automate that into a use of your Google Forms or your Google Sheets, or just the whole workflow itself can be automated. And so the first way that you can do that is through your podcast guest workflow toolkit, which I'm going to click into here so that you can see it. When you go into this, it does give you a discount of $10 that you can use when you begin using the toolkit. But basically, instead of you being chaotic with your podcast guest workflow, this is going to automate that so much easier with automated email templates, automated podcast show note information, idea generation, a content calendar is included. And all of the automations that I show you are native to the to Airtable, and I go through how to do that with you. So I hope that you guys enjoyed this specific lovely introduction to your podcast Power Up with ChatGPT. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. My email is Brittany, BRITTANY @teachingmindbodyandsoul. I'll see you guys later.